Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the School of Health Professions Dean's Lecture Series on skills beyond discipline-based expertise. And I'm glad you took a few minutes to join us this afternoon. We'll be talking for a little bit. I always think these sessions will be a little shorter than they are. We have our typical 30-30 format, which is up to 30 minutes, a max of 30 minutes of me talking. It may be a little bit less today. And then another up to 30 minutes for our conversation and dialogue together. So just as a reminder, this series, today is lecture 7, and we're talking about social capital, but the purpose of this series is to really provide some value-added information. It is targeted primarily to students, but of course everybody's invited, not just in health professions, but across the entire Downstate campus. And the reason for this particular series last year we talked about cultural issues. This year we're talking about skills beyond discipline-based expertise. And that's because my perspective is that we have to give our students some skills on top of what they're getting in terms of their main curricula, in terms of their expertise in whatever they came to Downstate to study, whether it's medicine, nursing, public health, or one of the disciplines within health professions. Because the reality is that they could go to any other accredited organization, institution across the city, state, or country, or even world. And if they do their due diligence as students, they'll be able to be good health professionals in whatever their chosen discipline is. So we try to give them something here at Downstate that's a little bit unique and maybe basically a cut above what they would get somewhere else. And that's the point of this series this year, those skills that are on top of, in addition to their discipline-based expertise. And I would submit that if you look around at people who are leading their fields, the leading thinkers and innovators, they aren't just good at their disciplines. They have some overarching skills that give them that additional horsepower to be those leaders that they are. So that's why we're talking about these skills. So tonight we're talking about social capital, which really is that is a new skill that I added to the mix just for this series, and as well as a skill for next month in April, which is values-driven civic engagement. So, always trying to keep things fresh and engage in continuous quality improvement. So always adding something new. So I figured social capital is an area that students don't typically get exposed to very much in their coursework, particularly in the health professions, or any other professions for that matter. So we're going to talk about that tonight. So again, thanks for joining. Let's get going. So social capital is a network of relationships that allows one to function effectively, also known as networking. So we're really talking about the idea of developing a social network, sometimes called social capital, that allows you to maneuver throughout one's career and have more options in terms of what your career options, professional options actually are. So our context obviously is in terms of one's career. Obviously, you can have social capital in other domains as well, but we're talking about the professional context of building social capital or networks within one's own career field. So success not only comes from what you know, but also from who you know. And many of you probably have heard that over the years, and some of you may have had personal experiences with it. I certainly have had some experiences with having been able to have access to opportunities, not just because of what I knew, but because of who I knew. And we'll get to the end for our discussion component. We can share some ideas and some notes on that as well. Career success depends on a number of factors. It depends on preparation of one's field. So that's the educational background that one has, as well as any other credentials a person may have that include certifications and licenses and those types of things that are in addition to the basic educational exposure that one has. It also depends on competence, which is how good you are, how effective you are at deploying yourself within one's field and functioning in an effective way to produce whatever outcomes are needed within your field. It also involves experience, and experience obviously comes with time. Beginning of one's career, they have less experience. As they go forward, obviously the experience goes up. It also has to do with motivation, drive, and ambition. And those three ideas really are the engine that drive the person. How driven is the person to really to succeed where they are right now and to go beyond where they are in terms of their impact and contribution within one's given discipline, field, or profession. And then it also includes social capital. And of course, there are other things that could be included, but these are the main areas, the main factors that contribute to one's success in a given career pursuit. Now, obviously, here at Downstate, we're dealing with profession. Then we're giving folks preparation in terms of giving them the basic education so they can have the credentials they need. Hopefully, they'll be competent once they complete their educational regimens here at Downstate. And we're also giving them the motivation, drive, and ambition. Of course, they came in with some of that because they wouldn't be here on their own accord if it weren't for that. The experience will come with time once they get out and begin their particular health care professional discipline. So that will kind of take care of itself once they get going. And the social capital is something they have to do as well with some intentionality. But we don't talk much about that typically in our courses, which is why we're talking about a little bit tonight. So relationships with people is the essential currency in social capital. It's those relationships with people that really is the commodity that we're talking about, with the currency within social capital. So all new opportunities in one's field derive from relationships with people. The essence of opportunities involves relationships with people. Evaluation of a new opportunity in one's discipline involves evaluating the relationships you have with people. Implementation of a new opportunity happens in the context of relationships with people. So relationships with people is the bottom line, most important area when you're talking about social capital. I'm of the opinion, sidebar, that if we had enough money and we had the right relationships, we could solve all of the problems that human beings have here on Earth. If you look around, almost every catastrophe, every disaster, obviously nature exacts its own force on things and impact, but most of the problems we have to do with not enough money, and the relationships are not where they need to be. Now, domains of social capital. So when you talk about the main areas that people tend to try to develop social capital in, one, role models and mentors. So folks who are trying to really move forward and develop their social capital typically try to start off with making sure they have mentors and role models and making sure the relationships with those folks are intact and very positive going forward. Also, they expand that to include peers and friends. Your peers when you're in school end up being your colleagues once you leave school. So you need to be explicit and intentional in making sure that you capture those relationships with those peers and friends and make sure that they continue to be positive going forward, as well as other miscellaneous adults that one is affiliated with over the course of one's life space. As we go throughout life, we're constantly meeting people come and go. And so all of those individuals are the miscellaneous adults that then become additional persons that we can have those relationships with to help expand on our network that we are building for ourselves. Social capital can be viewed as sort of a developmental concept, since all people require at least some social capital. And what I mean by that is that all people require some social interaction, some social supports, even though people may not necessarily fess up to that. We all need some social socialization with others. Some folks need more than others. And these things change over time. Since human development is the study of how we change and stay the same over time, over the course of a lifespan, social capital becomes that developmental process as well, because social capital changes along with us as we evolve over our lifespans. If you look at human development, the field of human development, it talks about how people really, over the course of their lives, are the same people as they evolve, but they really change in some pretty profound ways in terms of what their preferences and dislikes are, and their abilities and their interests, and those things all change. And social capital does as well. So it can be thought of as a developmental concept, since we all have some social interaction and have a need for some socialization. And it does sort of track along with us as we change as human beings in the natural aging process over the course of one's lifespan. An individual's social capital depends on her or his unique life path and is influenced by many factors. Obviously, we all have different experiences, we all have different opportunities, we have different levels of ambition, we have different amounts of how much we're intentional in terms of how we develop social capital and how intentional we are with our career. Some folks are very intentional, other folks are less intentional, and kind of just see how things unfold and kind of roll with the punches, so to speak. It's important that contemporary curricula begin to be more explicit in teaching individuals about the importance of social capital, which is sort of why I'm talking about it in this lecture series, because we got to have students who are in training to really begin to understand the importance of having a good, positive, professional social network and know how to develop it and know how to measure the extent to which it serves its purpose for them as they go forward. Building social capital into an existing curriculum can be a smooth transition, especially for those curricula that already contain things like service learning projects, clerkships, clinical experiences, and internships, or any type of community engagement that involves interfacing with new individuals in various settings in a community space over time. So what that means is that the health professions, not just in our school, but the health professions at Downstate, and we have primarily all health professions here at Downstate, they should all be ripe for areas for where those students who are pursuing those degrees can begin to build social capital, because the curricula have those emphasis points in terms of those points where we are juxtaposed with the community and involved with the community and engage with the community in various ways. And that's a perfect opportunity for a person to begin to expand their network and build that social capital. Obviously, building social capital is a challenge for individuals who have social interaction skills deficits. And there are people who have developmental disabilities who don't function very well in terms of socialization. So building capital would be an obvious challenge for those types of individuals, and anybody who has a poverty of opportunity, anybody who's really devoid of opportunities to interact with other persons and build those relationships with people would have difficulty building social capital. But I would hope that anybody who's enrolled at Downstate would be, for the most part, able to not have those barriers. So now, strategies for building social capital. So, and I got a little list here of we need to have some systematic intentionality, so we have to be purposeful about it. We got to think about it in an explicit way, which we don't often do. Sometimes we do, and I will say that sometimes people actually choose certain institutions because of the social capital that would be inherent in certain institutions. For example, an Ivy League institution. You say, okay, I'm going to attend an Ivy League undergraduate university because I know that if I go to Harvard or Yale, that I'll be rubbing elbows with people of influence and people who will be doing big things in their respective life arenas once they graduate. And so if you have that line of thinking, which some people do, you are beginning to think along the lines of building social capital as part of your undergraduate college experience. And I know that one thing, my son is a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy, and one of the things they tell them there, tell the students, is that your classmates when you graduate will be people of influence in important positions around the nation and the world. So make sure that you make friends and develop good relationships with all your peers that you're studying with, and keep those relationships positive going forward, even beyond graduation. So sometimes we are a little bit explicit in terms of choosing opportunities that allow us to build that social capital. So that's the kind of systematic intentionality that we need to build as a step one in building social capital. We need to maintain strong relationships with those who are teaching us, our faculty members and advisors and mentors and those folks. Obviously, maintain strong relationships with peers and fellow students, because they will be colleagues later on. We need to contemplate and identify who we think we need to have in our own personal, professional, social network, even if you don't currently know them, and brainstorm ways to gain access to them. So if you're going to be a particular type of a physician and a surgeon in a particular area, and you know there's some very influential surgeons who are already in the field and established that you like to meet and talk to and be inspired by, then you set your targets on figuring out how you can actually have an opportunity to have your path cross their path, so you can begin to build social capital with those individuals, and hopefully they'll become parts of your members in your network. We can ask current members in a personal network if you can have access to the networks that they have. And that's one of the things that my next strategist consider joining LinkedIn. One of the ways that you can immediately expand your social network is to tap into social networks of other people. So if I join a social network and I have 5 people that I already know that are already in my social network, and each of those 5 people have 10 people in their individual respective social networks. I can try to leverage my way into those respective individual social networks. So I end up with 50 people in my network, by association. And so that's one way to sort of fast track building that network of yours. Don't be afraid to conduct informational interviews. One thing that people oftentimes are afraid to do is talk to people about career opportunities unless they're looking for a specific job. But an informational interview by definition means that you're going to talk to somebody who works in an area that you have an interest in working in, and you're not really worried about whether that person can give you a job. You really just want to understand what they're doing and how they got to where they are, and to make them aware that you have some similar ambitions to what they have, and then they become a part of your network. People who know what you're trying to do, who can at some point maybe be helpful to you. Volunteering is another strategy. It's not everything is not all about what you can do to help others and receive a paycheck. Sometimes you do things for free just because it puts you in the context you want to be in and gives you that experience that's important for you, whether you're paid for it or not, in a traditional way. But I would submit that if you're volunteering and you're building a social network and you're helping folks in the process, you're being paid in a matter of speaking, but just in a non-traditional kind of way. Joining academic institution-based alumni associations is another excellent strategy for building social capital. Obviously, the alumni of an institution are folks who are already out and using the products they gain from the educational institution, the degrees and the knowledge and the learning, and implementing that in the real world. So if you can join those alumni associations, then you can begin to have contact with those folks and rub elbows with folks who are doing some of the kind of things you want to do. Attending professional organization meetings. Those happen in almost every discipline. And so, and those happen, regional, statewide, regional, and national basis. So that's another way. Some people say set a personal goal to add one individual to your professional network every time you attend a meeting with new people. So every time you attend a professional association meeting or a meeting where you're participating with people who are not people you normally interact with, try to at least add a new person to professional network. Meet somebody and talk to them enough to have a substantive interaction and try to include them in your social network. People who are trying to do social networking rarely do it in a direct way for asking for jobs or career opportunities, but they usually trust the process and know that as you're developing that network, as you're building that social capital over time, that it will automatically enhance your career building opportunities and potential. So it's not so much the immediate job that you may be looking for, it's building that long-term relationship that over time will yield those dividends that will help to enhance your career. Being gracious, obviously, is a thing we have to always do, when we're trying to build social capital. Be authentic, be yourself, don't try to be somebody you're not. And one thing my father used to tell me many years ago is never burn your bridges, because you never know when you have to come back across those bridges. So as you go throughout your career, try to, even people you don't agree with and haven't had the best interactions with, try to keep those relationships, at least somewhat positive if possible. And because you don't want to burn a bridge, because you never know when a person could be a very integral part of something you want to do later on as part of your social network. So things needed to truly engage in building social capital. So these are sort of recommended tools or beginning materials that you might need to help you get started. First of all, you have to have a goal. You got to think about what you want at whatever point you are in your career development. You may be in school or in graduate school. You may have already graduated and just beginning your career in the real world, or you may be 10 years into your career. So you need to have a developmentally specific and appropriate goal for what you want to have the social capital and the networking to do for your career at that point in your career development. So, and as you go forward, and take different opportunities when you're already in the work world, focus on building a career and a career path that's discernible and clear and that makes sense and logical and that builds upon itself, and not just taking a string of jobs or an assortment of jobs. You want to have there be some rationale and some rationality to how your career has progressed over time that can be seen in a very concrete way on your CV or your resume. So it should be obvious that you're building towards something identifiable and concrete in terms of how your career has progressed over time. That helps in terms of building social capital as well, because you can see that that clear progression and pathway in terms of the jobs you've taken over time, and you see where it's headed and where you started. Be ready with a brief spiel or blurb. That's a good personal introduction when you meet key people. Have a very crisp and concise and to the point spiel that you can give out that says, hey, I'm so and so, and here's what I'm trying to do, and here's what I'm currently doing. So the people, when you talk to them, and you're in a situation where you're meeting people for the first time, you don't have to beat around the bush. You can kind of lay it out pretty quickly to them, so they know what you're all about in short order, because you don't know how long an interaction will last. Oftentimes, if you're mingling in a reception or a cocktail party or whatever it may be. You'll need a system to manage your contacts or a platform. You can do that through LinkedIn. You can do it through a spreadsheet, obviously, but you'll need something that will allow you to make sure that you keep up with the people in terms of name, role, contact information, so you can be fairly organized in building your social network. You'll need a way, a strategy for systematically finding people with similar interests or people in your field that you want to connect with. And so you have to develop that over time, depending on what it is you're trying to do and who you're trying to connect with. But having some routine strategy for how you find people, seek them out, will be helpful. You have to obviously have an interest in and openness to meeting new people. You can't just be a bump on a log. You obviously have to be willing to converse with folks and talk to people in sort of in a cold call kind of way, impromptu, off the top. Always have in your back pocket some prompts as conversation starters in case that will help you along. If you don't naturally know how to break the ice, have some icebreakers or some things that you're equipped with, that you've already thought about, that you think will be effective. Develop that elevator message, and which is what I was saying before in terms of having some ready-made commentary that you can use on the spot. But the elevator message is specific in terms of it says who you are and what your current career and professional aspirations are. And I would encourage you to have various versions of the elevator message. So the elevator metaphor comes from the idea that imagine yourself getting on an elevator with a total stranger, and that stranger says, who are you and what do you do? And you have the time from when you get on the elevator and you maybe traveling 5 floors, say, or 10 floors, and you have just that amount of time to convey that in a very simple, crisp, clear way, without jargon, without professional terms, to a lay person, and be able to convey that in that period of time. And so that's the elevator message. So you probably want to have a 15-second version, maybe a 30-second version, and maybe a 60-second version that really cuts to the chase of who you are and what your career is all about, and professional aspirations for your career going forward. And sometimes folks actually practice and rehearse and practice and evaluate each other's elevator messages. Young people should be proactive in planning to develop social capital early in their career. So for example, when contemplating a career path, also consider the social capital implications. If you're going to be a politician, obviously you're thinking about social capital. So certain careers, social capital is sort of inherent, part and parcel of, more so than others. And so as you're picking a career as a young person, a career path, think about what the social capital and networking implications may be. Include social capital as an aspect or dimension that's part of your decision-making process in most of your major life dimensions. So have it be part of your decision-making rubric as you're thinking about making certain decisions along the way, key decisions in your life progression. Consider social capital to be a necessary raw material for professional growth and development. Part of your natural growth and development in your given discipline should include, well, how much is social capital going to play a role in this? Select a mentor who understands and values social capital, because that person, if they understand it and value it and have done it themselves, that person can certainly help guide you and advise you with whatever questions you have about the social capital and how to develop it. Always think about the win-win reciprocal nature of social capital. So you may be gaining someone new in your own professional network, but that person is also gaining you in her or his professional network. So it's a two-way street. So obviously, if you're very new in your career and you're including somebody in your social network who's seasoned and established and well-known, even though they're gaining you and you're gaining them, you're getting the advantage because you're getting somebody who's more accomplished. They're getting somebody who's more of a novice. But either way, you're both gaining a new person in the network, and it's still a win-win reciprocal kind of endeavor. And as with everything, try to evaluate social capital and simply ask yourself, as I'm going forward, to what extent is my social network helping me? Or is it working optimally for me? Or is it lagging? Could I be doing more with it? Should I be devoting more time to it, more intentional effort to it? So just have an ongoing sort of sheet about how much progress is giving you, or how much you're able to use that as part of a bona fide career development strategy. It's not just about what you know and how good you are. It's also about who you know. And with that, I think we're almost 30 minutes in, so I will stop, and we can switch gears and open up the floor for a conversation aspect of this session. And I will start off by saying that I can think of several jobs that I've gotten over the years, and now that I've been working about 39 years, which is a good amount of time since my undergraduate days. And I consider all my full-time jobs since I had my bachelor's degree to be my professional career. So that's 39 years for me. And I can think of probably in the first 10 years of my career, probably a handful, maybe 4 or so opportunities that I got, not just because I had competency and was proficient in what it was that I had to do in a given job, it was because I knew somebody, had an inside track. And in today's world, it never hurts to have that social capital, to know somebody, to get your foot in the door. Because the bottom line is, you're not cheating the process, because once you're in that position, that role, whatever your job is, you've got to perform. You've got to be competent. Otherwise, you won't last. So there's no shame in getting an inside track because you happen to know somebody who knows you, or know somebody who knows somebody else who knows you, that allows you to have a little bit of an advantage going into the opportunity. Because you need every advantage you can get in today's world, because things are very competitive and becoming more competitive going forward, just because we have a lot of qualified people who are walking around, who are looking for work and looking for opportunities. So no shame in your game. It's not just what you know, it's who you know as well. So I can certainly say that within my career, there have been opportunities when I have benefited from the social network or the social capital that I had developed at the time, by knowing somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody. Because of those connections, have allowed me to have an opportunity to still play and try out for something that I was able to get, and then you got to obviously perform. So let me open it up, and that's a little bit of sharing from me. Let me open it up and see what other questions, comments, observations, critiques, points of agreement, points of disagreement anybody may have. The floor is officially open. Social capital, networking. Anybody here?
Hi, I'm Alan Shoshana.
Hey, Dr. De Oliveira, how you doing?
Question for you. How do you build social capital without improving social behaviors, attitudes, or even the social structure?
How do you build social capital without improving social behavior, attitudes, and social structure?
Yeah.
I don't know. Go ahead.
So for example, you spoke about students, teachers serving as mentors. You also spoke about, students have to be able to communicate their interests, wants, or be prepared to discuss who they are, what they want on the fly. Right. But if a student has a negative experience or feels negatively about a course or the school, or undecided, who to go to, how do you support that student in terms of looking past where they are in that moment? I don't know if I'm making myself clear, right? But because when I saw the title social capital or building social capital, my instinct went straight to community engagement, right, mentorship, coaching. But if someone has a negative interaction, it may preclude them from seeking those opportunities out or
Yeah.
utilizing the resources.
Right. Yeah. So that, in life, there are positive experiences and not so positive experiences we all have. And so some of those not so positive experiences are gonna get in the mix and be a part of our reality. It's unavoidable. But the idea is to sort of keep the big picture in mind, which is as you're going, and it's hard for people to do this. They become immobilized by specific situations. But the idea is to sort of take the high road and keep the big picture in mind, and always realize that what you're trying to do is to position yourself. And part of that positioning is having the best education you can have, having the most credentials you can have within your given career path, what's appropriate for you. Everybody that need to have an MD or a PhD or a doctorate. I say if you want to be a plumber, be the best plumber you can be a master plumber. Have the highest credential, have the most experience, and the highest competence you can have in whatever your career pursuit is. And in addition to that, you need to have some social capital, some networks, some people who know you in a positive way to help support you as you maneuver and try to climb the career ladder to get to where you ultimately want to be in terms of your professional ambition and aspirations. But along the way, not every experience is going to be positive. And so people just have to keep the big picture in mind. There are always going to be people you just don't get along with, or for whatever reason, you got off on the wrong foot with them, and it's hard to get back on the right foot. So, do what you can to repair those relationships, and don't do anything to make them any worse. Don't burn the bridge if you can help it. But sometimes you have an encounter that's not going to be one of the strongest links in your network. And it's going to be, yeah, I know that person, but we didn't really hit it off that well, and you're not going to utilize that part of your social network very much. I wouldn't preclude it. I wouldn't say burn it and forget about it, because you never know who you'll meet in your next social or career-based interaction. But I think you just have to keep the big picture in mind and realize that not every interaction or every encounter is going to be, exceedingly positive. There will be downsides to some of the things we have to do, and that's life. It's not you take the good with the bad. Hopefully, the good outweighs the bad, and you always try to see the glass as half full rather than half empty. Because then you have the assets more positive orientation rather than the can-do attitude rather than the negative orientation. Yeah, and learn.
Thank you.
In every situation, you learn. Sometimes you learn. Okay, it's a hard way to learn, but you have to learn and move and see what can you glean from it that helps you do better the next time you have a similar encounter, or helps you at least know what types of encounters you may want to avoid.
Thank you, Alan.
You're welcome. No easy answers. Nelson Mandela said, "There's no easy walk to freedom," and that's certainly the case. No panaceas, no silver bullets. We just got to roll with what we have and make the best of it.
I like that analogy.
Yeah. Other comments, questions, observations, sharing of experiences in terms of developing social capital? I can look around Downstate and see several individuals in key positions that I would submit, and they're very competent. Were positioned to get those positions based on social capital, having a network, or having an affiliation with somebody who was in a position to hire them that predated their role at Downstate. I can think of at least 3 off the top of my head for key high-ranking officials at Downstate who are in those positions. They are competent and qualified, and they have what it takes to do the jobs. But I'm willing to bet that a big part of them having those roles is that they were known by the decision maker who made the hire well in advance of their time at Downstate. And so they had a positive history with people before that time, and that gave them the inroad they needed to actually get into the role they're in right now. And so, I won't name any names or any positions, but I can think of at least 3 high-ranking officials. When I say high-ranking, I mean dean or above at Downstate, where people have, I'm betting and surmising that a big part of them being in their roles is, in addition to being qualified, also having an inside track with having known their boss now before they were at Downstate. And that's not unusual. You think about when a new CEO comes in, and typically brings a person or two or people with her or him, and that's based on past history. But in a matter of speaking, that's based on the fact that they have social capital with each other, and so they want to bring those people in with them because they know they work well with them. But I'm not talking about that in the cases I'm thinking about. So other comments, questions? Was anybody expect does the term social capital lead anybody here to a different place than what I actually talked about? In other words, your expectations. You think I was going to talk about something different from what I talked about? Did anyone have a different expectation or perspective on social capital than building a professional network? Okay.
I didn't. It's Shoshana. I guess for me, it's just a different terminology.
Yeah.
But having hear you explain it, we as capital without knowing that's the term.
Okay.
Right, through,
I missed a little. You bleeped out a minute there. So say again.
I'm saying as a school,
right,
we are doing it. It was a new terminology for me.
Okay.
So I didn't know really what to expect from it, but other than mentorship. But I think we do much more than that. One of the things that you said that jumped out at me was the service learning piece.
Right.
And how I started to think how as a school, we could incorporate that more throughout, from orientation throughout the students' stay here. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
So yeah, so when I mentioned service learning and internships and clerkships and all those things, those are, in my mind, those are opportunities within our current curricula across the school where we could build out more social capital development opportunities in a more explicit way than we probably are dealing with it right now. So I'm not sure how much. For example, I know we have a very big community service learning community project aspect in occupational therapy program. And then Dr. Thomas is the coordinator of that. And I'm not sure how explicit she is in telling the students that when you do this, out in the community, do these projects for these various community entities, service providing entities, that it's a great opportunity for you as a single professional to begin to build your own social capital and build your own network that you can then capitalize on later on to help catapult your career. I mean, I'm sure students realize that. I know she realizes it. I guess my question is, do they have an explicit conversation about it so that the students can go in thinking about it really on their sleeve, wear it on their sleeve, on the tip of their tongue, really clear on that as part of the gain and benefit from having to do this particular experience. And because I think we have to be a little more systematic and intentional and explicit about it so the students really understand. We have a lot, we do that. We just have it this week, tomorrow. Is it tomorrow? Yeah, a career networking event in the School of Health Professions. I mean, that's an amazing opportunity to build social capital because we have existing students who are matriculating, and then we have alums who are already working in the field, coming together, who don't know each other at this point, but they will after tomorrow. And so I think we have to be a little more explicit in letting people know that here's what's really happening in this kind of experience. And that you need to do this more in your career because, again, it's not how much you know and what you know. It is how much and what you know, but it's also who you know that really ensures that you have a smooth transition and have more opportunities available to you as you go forward. It's all those factors, and it never hurts to know people, particularly if you know them in a very positive and they know you in a very positive light. But you're right, yeah, we have lots of opportunities. I would submit that all the curricula at Downstate have lots of opportunities, natural opportunities, whether it be social networking and capital building. We just have to see them differently and seize those opportunities in a more explicit way with our students who are in development. So yeah, good points.
Dr. Lewis, have you seen this work in the negative? I've witnessed individuals who may not exactly be qualified for the position they're given, but not because what they know, it's because who they know, they get the position.
Yes, we've all seen those situations where people are benefactors of social promotion, so to speak. Sort of like, so, social promotion in grade school, where there's move students along, whether they have the skills for a given grade level or not, just to move them along and not bottleneck and bog down the system. We've all seen that in the work world. We say this guy got this job because he's, a distant cousin of so and so, or has a relationship with that person, and you see them floundering in the job because they're really not qualified at all, and they really got the job only because of who they knew, not because they had any competence. So absolutely, there are lots of, life is replete with those kinds of examples. But what I always say is, don't worry about that in your own specific instance, because in your own specific instance, you'll be qualified and competent. And the reality is that once you're in the job, even if you got it through knowing somebody, if you're going to be successful, you have to do it and be competent. And so the proof will be in the pudding one way or another. And you don't want to be that person who's in the job that everybody knows you got it because you knew somebody and you're not doing well, and it's obvious that you got it only because you knew somebody. But yeah, there are lots of examples of that throughout history, and that we can all probably point to in our own lives. But what I always say is, because sometimes like my own kids will say, well, I don't want to get a job because I know somebody. I want to be the best qualified person. I said, well, you know what? When you apply for a job, there maybe a dozen best qualified people. And so take whatever advantage you can get. And if you can have an advantage of having a social network or some social capital or knowing somebody on the inside that allows you to get your foot in the door, that's fine. But the reality is, once your foot is in the door and you're in the job, you're not going to stay unless you can cut the mustard. You got to be able to perform and make it happen and be competent. And otherwise, you'll be exposed as an imposter. And in a matter of speaking, run out of town, or maybe not, but they'll be whispering behind your back. And nobody wants to be the object of that, I don't think. But no, so yes, it's not. There are negatives that can manifest when you have access to an opportunity that you really shouldn't have access to, because you don't have the substance to really do the work that you're gaining access to. So, yeah,
So use your social networking to rise to it, secure it, and then rise to the occasion. Unsecure it.
Right. And the person who has good, even people who maybe not as experienced, but if you have good training and you're a fast learner and you really want to do a good job and you're ambitious, social networking can sometimes get you into a job that you maybe weren't fully ready for in terms of your current competence and abilities. But because you are success driven, you get in there and you scramble and you make it work, and it pushes you to do what you need to be successful, and it actually pushes you along at a faster pace, which is even a boost for your career. I think I've had a few jobs like that where I got in and I thought to myself, oh God, I'm almost sorry I was lucky enough to get this job, because now that I'm in it, I see it's a little bit over my head. But if you really are willing to dig deep and put your nose to the grind and really, work hard, you can rise to the occasion, even being at that disadvantage. And but you have to have some basic skills to make that happen, and not everybody does. So even in that situation, it may feel negative at first, but if you scramble and you really work hard, you can kind of catch up. Run fast enough and catch up, and get on that train that seems to have left you at the station because you weren't really ready for the trip. So yeah, it can, these are all variations and things that can happen. Good points, Mark and Shoshana. Thank you very much. Others? Anything anybody else wants to say? I'm just trying to keep up. Still have a little less than 15 minutes, but then again, if there's nothing anybody wants to say, I hate to hold people on if nobody has anything to contribute, but let's keep going if we can and want to.
Last comment, Alan. I guess
How you know it's the last one? Miss Teasy?
for me, for last comment
Got you.
for me. In hindsight, I guess I had used social capital to secure my positions at Downstate without thinking, because I tend to be, you may not think that, but I tend to be on the shyer side, but just having small conversations, informal conversations with you, with other faculty members, that's exactly what I was doing.
Right.
Right. I was putting myself out there and talking about my skill set to make myself more marketable.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it works in your favor, and it can work in other people's favor as well. You have to promote yourself, even if you're shy. And there are ways to do that, to finesse that, so you don't come across as being, too assertive or cocky or arrogant. Just kind of, promote yourself in a humble way, so that people can kind of see what you have to offer. And don't beat them over the head with it, but kind of let them see your assets. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's at work. It's at work. Networking and social capital is at work in a lot of situations where we're not really aware that it really is part of the process. But anytime you're a known entity to the person before you get into the job, then social capital is at work. And obviously within a move within an institution, you move from one job to another within an institution, and you get the job. When there are some outside people and others, then obviously your reputation and the fact that people know your work and all that stuff helps you in that situation. Other comments, questions, observations, critiques, points of agreement, points of disagreement. I love points of disagreement. We're in the academy, we don't all have to agree. Oh, I see Michelle Fisher, great.
Yes, for myself, I think I have to work on my social capital. That's what I have realized with this conversation that we've been having.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. We all have aha moments where we say, yeah, I think I need to do a little better in this arena or in this area. And because you want everything at your disposal, every weapon at your disposal, every positive aspect at your disposal to work in your favor in terms of enhancing your career development going forward. People don't oftentimes even think about enhancing their career development going forward. They just say, okay, I'm in this job, and one day I want to get a job making more money. And and so they're thinking about it in a sort of indirect way, but they're not really being explicit and systematic and strategic about it. Which is okay, if it serves them and they're satisfied with it, that's fine. But anything that makes you say, aha, I could be doing more of this, or I could be doing this better, or this could be helping me more if I could learn a little bit more about it, it's a good thing.
And that's exactly how I'm feeling at this point.
Well, that's great. Yeah, that's great. It's a great benefit. Again, it's not what you know. Well, I should say it is what you know, but not only what you know, but it's also who you know. And because people in relationships really do, everything is about people in relationships, and then of course money. But any work situation, any job situation, relationship is key. It all comes back to relationships, and being able to capitalize and knowing more people is good. Having positive relationships with everybody you know is good. My dad really did drill in my head to not burn those bridges, and I'm not so sure I've not always been successful in not burning bridges, because I get angry sometimes and say the heck with it. But if you can keep your head and not burn those bridges, that really will serve you well, I think. So thank you for sharing that. Is it Michelle? Did I get that right?
Yes, Michelle.
Okay, Michelle, because I see the way it's spelled, it could be Michelle as well. Okay, Michelle, thank you again.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Going once? Going twice? I hate to hold people. Love to give time back to you. We all, time is a precious commodity. We can give you back a few minutes. That'd be great. So I think hearing no other comments, I think we're done. Thank you for joining and being attentive and indulging me. And next month, we'll be talking about values-driven civic engagement. Again, one of the newer sessions that I've added to this series. So thanks again, everybody. Stay safe and let me see, make sure I have any comments. I don't see any comments in the chat. Stay safe and be well. Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Thanks, Alan.
All right, take care, everyone.
Yes, thanks, bye.